We're really, really proud of the process that has led us to this point where we've been able to do over 35 consultations in every continent of the world, with over 650 people formally participating in these consultations, giving their time, their passion, and their expertise to it. And the few things that have emerged as we've analyzed the data is, one, there are things we're going to hold on to no matter how much the pushback is. We will not remove ourselves from the rights of every single individual, no matter what their gender or sexual identity is, and we will always stand for that. We will always stand in solidarity, and we will always stand in care for each other. We're also willing to let go of a few things. We recognize that perhaps the gender equality sector hasn't been as united as in solidarity and as much moving forward as it could have been. And this is one of the things that we want to focus on as we go forward. And the last piece that's sort of emerging that I am personally really, really passionate about, and it's so amazing to see this come together, is a move from centering international institutions in the global space to centering the relationship between the state and the people who live within that state and the services the state provides them and the rights that each individual holds inalienable and indivisible because they are a person for no other reason than they are a person. And these are international treaties and things that states have signed on to, and they have an accountability to the people for that. And we need to start focusing on those. People have a right to health, they have a right to security, they have a right to economic prosperity and well-being, etc., etc. So that's where the declaration is going to be going, and it's going to be a really powerful movement for the sector to focus on, and hopefully in the next few years it could lead to some transformations in how we think about and how we try to enact gender equality. Global health is one of the sectors that's been affected the most, which means that direct service provision has been greatly affected. Things like HIV, AIDS, medication and treatment, sexual reproductive health and rights, and reproductive health services have been greatly affected. And of course, this has downstream effects on care, family, the burdens women carry, etc., etc. I mean, I could go on for a really long time, but this is a crisis that is really affecting low and middle income countries, particularly in Africa and South Asia, where we've seen the most dramatic of the reductions that have been happening. We've been looking at the climate crisis and discussing it for a very long time. One of the things that's only now starting to embed itself within the discussions is that climate is not a gender neutral issue. A couple of things around it. One, the climate crisis, the various shocks and stresses that come with it, are faced by people and experienced by people very, very differently. A 40-year-old educated man who has many different choices in life, has a lot of social capital, and has the possibilities of income diversification, faces a flood or a drought or a heat stress very, very differently from, say, a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old girl who not only has less options and less resilience because of it, but also a lot of the negative coping strategies that communities and households use in order to deal with the stress or shock. Say a flood comes, how does a household deal with it? Well, one of the things is they pull girls out of school because they no longer have the funding to be able to take her to school. She loses years of education every single time there's a shock or a stress that she's faced. She also has to take up more care responsibilities and have more care burdens on her. And then when these crises and shocks and stresses become extreme, often households will resort to early marriage or other tactics like that to help cope with it, which means that girls disproportionately take the burden of the climate crisis, but are some of the people who contribute the least to the climate crisis. So it is a very, very gendered issue. The other aspects of it is that there's very few women in the leadership of how to deal with the climate crisis, and it's imperative that we have more women in leadership positions in discussing the climate crisis. We think about the negative coping strategies that communities and households have to put in place that affect girls and women the hardest, and also that we make sure that as we come up with these solutions, we think about the people who are being affected and we include them in them. Well, one thing we have to acknowledge is that the last 2 years have been absolutely devastating as far as international aid is concerned. A lot of attention has been paid to what the US has done with the dismantling and demolition of USAID. But even prior to that, many governments were already pulling back their ODA and ODA commitments. Most prominent of those is the UK, the Nordic countries, Europe, all of whom have had quite dramatic reductions in the amount that they've been giving out, but also the things that they've been giving aid to. So we have to acknowledge that right now it's not just the usual ups and downs, but it's an absolute sea change and transformation in the world and the sector that depended on ODA. I will put a note of optimism here too. I don't think the system is going to come back, but I do think that it's been a clarion call and a warning shot to the governments that had become accustomed to providing these services through this ODA that was being given. And many of them are now questioning why they've let themselves be stymied in these systems where they themselves cannot provide basic services to their citizens. And many of them are now looking to alternative ways of being able to do that. And I think this can only be a very, very good thing, because in the long run, that is what is sustainable. And those are the governments are who can be held accountable by the citizens for whom the services are being provided.